Hello again, everyone. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and thanks for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. First on the hazard map, we've got a warning out here, winter storm warning out for tonight until 6 a.m. Monday morning for the Kobuk Valley, and that's for more snow actually in the upslope areas here toward the Brooks Range. Could see another 7 to 9 inches of snow, or total 7 to 9 inches. Anyway, with the winds gusting to 30 miles an hour, the new snow, that'll create hazardous travel conditions, reducing visibilities near zero at times. And then there's a winter storm watch out for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for tomorrow until tomorrow evening. In that time frame, winds kicking up to 45 miles an hour in gusts will create blowing snow that could reduce visibilities or create whiteout conditions actually during the day tomorrow into tomorrow evening. And then a winter weather advisory continues here for the northeastern Brooks Range area, north slope, eastern north slope. That's for gusty winds, maybe up to 30 miles an hour, 25 to 30, with visibilities possibly down and blowing snow to a quarter mile at times. And wind advisory out until midnight for the Alaska Range here for those south to southeast winds. In some areas could gust as high as 65 miles an hour. Seeing gusts up to the 50 to 60 mile an hour range in some areas here through the passes of the Alaska Range, like Delta Junction, for example. Winter weather advisory here for the Galena zone, and that's for conditions not quite as bad as the warning area there. Still gusty winds and some additional snow. That's out until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning as well. Maybe a couple more inches of snow with that Arctic front. It's kind of stationary right over the area there, back up like that. At least through tonight, it'll continue to snow with some gusty winds. And then winter weather advisory there for the Shishmaref area and the northwest coast out until midnight, I believe, there for similar conditions. Moving on to satellite imagery, you can see kind of a sharp contrast right through here, this area moving northwestward, and then we've got cold air coming southeastward here, as you can see by the lower cloud streaming. Where the two meet, King Salmon, for example, today 28 degrees, heavy snow, and north winds gusting to 40 miles an hour at Dillingham. And just to the east there, Iliamna, 38 degrees and light rain with light southeast winds. Otherwise, we've got this front bringing the wind and rain into the North Gulf Coast. Gales along the coast with Middleton Island seeing gusts over 50 miles per hour today, and as well as Delta Junction in the interior there. Quite a cloud shield associated with this, but the precipitation really hung up here along the North Gulf Coast. There was some light rain got into the Palmer area at times today. Some of that could be slipping up into the southeast interior as well. Nearly an inch of rain falling, or actually over an inch falling at Yakutat, with 1 1/3 inches picking up at Ketchikan down there. Otherwise, anywhere from 1/4 to 2/3 of an inch falling across the remainder of the southeast coast, as well as the North Gulf Coast here, 1/2 inch at Kodiak here with the system today, and also up there at Valdez, a little over 4/10 of an inch of precipitation. And then several inches of snow. King Salmon, I think, 3 to 4 inches or 2 to 4 inches of snow today with this, and a kind of a narrow band of some pretty good snowfall occurring along that Arctic front. Clearing out back to the west, drying out, obviously drying out and clearing out here back to the west along the coast there. Eastern Bristol Bay, north winds gusting maybe 30 to 40 miles an hour here across the Alaska Peninsula. Sand Point seeing gusts about 40 miles per hour today, with lighter winds back to the west. Some isolated snow showers around Alaska. Cloudy with some light snow showers at times for the Pribilofs. And not much going on out there to the west, just some clouds, mostly cirrus, with a system that's staying down to the south. That'll begin to increase in wind a little bit keep precipitation chances high over the central Aleutians tonight into tomorrow. On the chart, there's the system down there, 979 millibar low. And you can see not much of a gradient here up into the Aleutians, but enough moisture there for some scattered snow showers. Real isolated snow showers there for the Pribilofs into the Alaska Peninsula, clearing more of a factor than the snow shower activity is. And a weak trough, maybe some lingering snow showers along the coast, but generally improving here. This low slowly sliding northward, wet Kodiak Island today, become a little more showery this afternoon. And moderate to heavy rain in areas of the North Gulf Coast here, especially western Prince William Sound. Portage Valley had several inches of rain today in 12 hours as usual, but lighter amounts elsewhere into the Panhandle. And clearing skies up there over the upper Yukon Valley, Chalk-Yitzhak, and another location had 54 degrees this afternoon, and Birch Creek had 49, so it didn't look like it was that far out of the question with some sunshine in there. And otherwise, temperatures getting in the lower 50s in and around the mid and upper Tanana Valley. It's also at 51, and also lower 50 showing up here in the southeast coast. Those temperatures are going to continue to warm over the next couple of days. For tonight, this building high over the British Columbia area is going to keep this moisture from pushing inland. In fact, it's going to start pushing it back to the west-northwest. The warm front lifting northward, that's going to keep a zone of moderate to heavy rain from Yakutat into the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound areas. Mixed precipitation chances here across south central Alaska with the Arctic boundary and the rain-snow line staying back to the west there. So you can see that snow continues up across the advisory and warning areas here for the snow. And back to the northeast there along the Brooks Range. And then clearing skies, light winds out here over the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island. Really no gradient at all, Seward Peninsula. Winds diminishing now here over the windy areas we saw today. Dillingham into King Salmon and back up to the north a little bit. Isolated snow showers, the Alaska Peninsula. Weak trough snow showers here over the Bering Sea. And this system just to the south of the eastern Aleutians there, we'll see tomorrow actually shifts off to the east there. Chance of rain or snow maybe for Atka over to Unalaska, Nikolsky. Otherwise, not too bad wind-wise. The gradient stays to the south of the area too. And no wind out to the west. This low so weak, maybe it'll kick off a few snow showers, but that'll stay west of Shimian at 2. And high pressure up here with the northwest interior, not particularly strong, just 1,008 millibars, but definitely clearing it out with light winds all the way from the north slope southward. You may pick up a few more clouds, maybe over the Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, but looking good out here in the west as this area really can't slide east because this big ridge over Canada is building northwestward and pushing it back to the west. So another wet day here for the North Gulf Coast, maybe southern Cook Inlet, and then the western Alaska Range into the Kuskokwim Valley. This portion really weakening now over this. Let's look for some isolated snow showers. And then for the outlook on Tuesday, sunshine, highs 55 to 63 here over the southeast coast. Sunshine over the interior. It won't be as warm over the eastern interior as you saw today or tomorrow. Cooler air coming in with this clearing sky condition. This boundary is sort of shifting back to the west-northwest, but weakening, so that's going to keep a narrow band of light rain going from Cape Yakataga into Portage, Whittier, Valdez, down the coast of the Kenai Peninsula, and more rain chances for Kodiak Island. Otherwise, mostly sunny here over the interior. Sunshine trying to push all the way out to the Pribilof Islands on these northeast winds. Snow showers up in the northwest. And for the lows tonight, mid to upper 30s for south central Alaska, upper 20s to lower 30s for the Tanana Valley. A little below zero here back in the northwest coastal areas, and lows in the 40s mostly for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow afternoon down there in the lower to mid 50s. Some areas could see 56, 7, and Tanana Valley up there in the interior, anyway from upper 40s to lower to maybe mid 50s, and much cooler behind that Arctic boundary back here, single numbers back to the west, mid 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. High or lows for the Tuesday morning, 20s south central Alaska, and upper teens to upper 20s for the eastern interior here. Below zero coming into the Galena and Ambler areas, and about 10 below on the Arctic coast. Lows in the 40s, lower 40s for the Panhandle. Highs the following afternoon, 55 to 62, about sums it up down there with nothing but sun. In the 40s, you can see cooler up here north of the Alaska Range, near zero on the Arctic coast, lower 40s for Kodiak Island.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather showing a lot of IFR here through the central interior from the Aleutian Range right on up to the Brooks Range and kind of branching out there, coming across the on the south side of the mountains there, and then on up in across the central Arctic coast. VFR north of the Alaska Range, upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country right up to the Yukon River and beyond, almost to the Porcupine River. And then IFR here North Gulf Coast, pushing inland a fair ways here, especially across the Wrangell Mountains and up along the southern slopes of the Alaska Range in areas. Southwest IFR, marginal here over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians with some pretty good VFR in areas, Bristol Bay and northwest of the Alaska Peninsula. IFR into the Panhandle, mostly in the north. VFR way down south toward Dixon Entrance. Tomorrow afternoon, that all mess retreats back to the northwest with that building ridge over western Canada, and temperatures will respond to that. We've got some IFR here over the excuse me, Alaska Range, especially here to the western Alaska Range, and then breaking out to VFR, Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, back up across Bristol Bay, western interior, some pretty good VFR up over the west and northwest. Even the Arctic coast becoming VFR tomorrow afternoon, and weak marginal VFR, full of holes out here over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And that pattern holds through Tuesday morning, mostly marginal here for the central and eastern Aleutians. You can see pretty good VFR breaking out up to the north, still Bristol Bay, Kodiak, VFR. IFR, northern Susitna Valley up to the Alaska Range area. And looks like some IFR now, lower conditions into the upper Tanana Valley here, right on up into the eastern Brooks Range, and also along the North Gulf Coast, but to a lesser extent. Another band of marginal and VFR or IFR conditions there from the Noatak Valley down into the Yukon Delta. Good VFR for the Panhandle, and that holds through Tuesday afternoon there, and this area becoming a little bit less, but still marginal or IFR here from Prince William Sound right on up to the Alaska Range, Isabel Pass. Marginal VFR back toward the western Alaska Range. Good VFR here, northern Bering Sea, all of the western interior, much of the central and northern interior as well. And the Aleutians, still some marginal stuff here from Atka to False Pass, and then VFR back out to the west. Passes tomorrow for Anatuvik. IFR trending toward marginal VFR into the afternoon. And for Adigan, I'm going to go marginal there. She could be a little bit better. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR for a significant portion of the day on Monday there for both passes. Rainy, same thing. And for Windy, marginal VFR, but out the north entrance VFR. And Isabel, occasional IFR. Mentasta, same sort of pattern seen for the last few days, VFR with chance of some marginal conditions on the southern entrance. And Tanita, IFR with marginal VFR on the eastern entrance. And for the Portage area, IFR again throughout the day tomorrow. And Chilkoot and White, IFR becoming marginal. Freezing levels 2,000 to 8,000 feet now, that warmer air pushing in over the Panhandle and mostly up into Canada, but 2,000 to 4,000 feet over the eastern Arctic coast. Icing, considerable moderate rime here, southern Alaska, especially the North Gulf Coast areas, and that kind of pulling back from the Panhandle. And looking at the jet stream, here's that building ridge over western Canada. Good south flow at 140 knots, continuing to funnel that moisture right on up to the coast there. And then the Arctic jet up here to the northwest, keeping it chilly over the northern Bering Sea and out that way. 9,000 feet, strong winds, 60, 65 knots into the Panhandle, and 40 to 50 coming onto the North Gulf Coast, otherwise the interior 20 to 35, lighter over the southwest interior, southwest 30 on the Arctic coast. And winds increasing a little bit here over the eastern Aleutians, that next storm. Same thing at 3,000 feet, 25 to 35 knot winds there. But at 3,000 feet here, with kind of a weak trough axis over the interior and then a weak ridge along the coast, pretty light winds until you get here to the east, Copper River Basin over the North Gulf Coast, 20 to 25 knots and maybe 30 knots on the eastern Arctic coast, and winds 40 to 50 along the outer coast of the Panhandle, 15 knots over towards the border. And for turbulence, look for considerable moderate chop here from Sitka, Port Alexander, northwestward Yakutat to about Cordova and the southern Kenai Peninsula areas, and some isolated moderate chop over the Aleutians and the eastern Arctic coast. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us once again is Eric Stevens, our good friend from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at UAF. And thanks for joining us, Eric. Really appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here, Dave.
We love to hear about all the fascinating developments, new and old, and how we're using the tools here, especially around Alaska. And I've got to think that, satellite meteorology right now is a fascinating time to be involved in. If we go back to the first satellite, Tyros, back in 1960, I think is when we got some of those first pictures. Weather and meteorology probably changed that day for a whole lot of people, and it's still changing today, right?
Oh, you know it. Satellite imagery is so important, and it's getting better all the time. Yeah. Of course, never perfect, but especially for us in Alaska, where there are other data sets like radars and weather balloons are so thinly spread. Right. The satellite is the great equalizer because the satellite sees everything.
Right.
Yeah. Right. We've got one particular issue in volcanic ash detection.
That's a big deal here. Yeah.
You know it. If you fly an airplane into volcanic ash, your jet engine might just fail. And an airplane without engines is in a world of hurt. Sure. So if there's a volcano that goes off, satellite imagery is the way to track that plume of ash and to tell pilots this is where you need to not be to avoid this ash plume. And there's a phrase out there, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Okay.
Well, it turns out, what we're going to discuss today, that the difference is everything. There's a technique called channel differencing.
Okay.
That if you take one piece of the spectrum of what the satellite detects and a slightly different wavelength of that spectrum, even though those two images might look similar, magical things happen when you subtract one from the other. And they reveal information that was already there, but it was hard to find until you did that subtraction.
That sounds like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure when he's got those fancy glasses and he's flipping one up and back and forth. I mean, is this what we're talking about?
Let's go more highbrow and talk Michelangelo.
Oh,
so apparently Michelangelo made some amazing sculpture, and someone said, Michael, that's amazing. How did you do it? And Michelangelo's reply allegedly was, well, in that rock, the statue was already in there.
Right.
I just scraped away the unnecessary bits. In satellite meteorology, sometimes there are meteorological features that are in the data, but you can't see it until you combine or difference some of the channels.
Okay.
And we've got a case, good old Pavlov volcano goes off now and then.
Sure.
And you can observe directly a picture of the volcano. Just take it with your iPhone. You can see a volcano going off.
Yep.
Right. But if you want to get the broad view, we need satellite to do that. Now, there are a couple of wavelengths that we can look at. So what's a wavelength? That's the amount of space between a peak and a valley and another peak in a certain part of the electromagnetic spectrum. We're going to look at 12 micron wavelength and 10.8 micron wavelength.
What is a micron?
So what's a micron? Yeah, we're getting into the geek department now. A micron is a unit of length, and it is quite tiny. We're looking at what's called long wave wavelengths.
Okay.
But it takes 25,000 of these microns to make an inch. A human blood cell is about 5 microns across. So when we're talking about 12 micron imagery as allegedly long wave, well, that's relative.
Pretty short for light.
Yeah, it's other part of the, it's just an expression for the spectrum there.
Okay.
So we can look at a 12 micron image, say a satellite image. At 12 microns, we're seeing a heat signature here, really, and the way this color enhancement works is the yellow and the red stuff is high cold clouds down here over the Gulf of Alaska into South Central. And if you were asked, where do you find the volcanic ash plume in this image?
Hey, where do you find the volcanic plume in this image?
It's hard to do. I'm not sure I could find it. If you were to look at this image and just say, show me what jumps out at you here, I'd say, well, nothing really. Well, let's look. So 12 micron doesn't help us. Let's look at 10.8 microns.
All right.
All right, look at that. It's practically the same image. So where's this volcanic ash? Can't find it at 12 microns, can't really see it at 10.8, but when we subtract one channel from the other, magically the plume appears. The color enhancement here highlights the ash in blue.
Wow.
The information was already there, but we couldn't find it until we subtracted one channel from another.
Very interesting.
It's almost magical. Similarly, let's say you're looking for fog up on the north slope. It's kind of a foggy neighborhood.
Sure.
In 11 micron and 3.9 micron, we've got a 3.9 micron image here. It's a big fuzzy blur over Barrow. We can't see where the fog is. But the information is lurking in there waiting for us to reveal it. All we have to do is find that difference between the 11 micron and the 3.9, and then this image becomes this image, and the fog bank jumps right out, and you can see it up there at Barrow. Now, you got to choose the right tool for the job.
Sure.
Like they say, you open your toolbox, all kinds of stuff in there. What do we need for this particular task? If you want to find volcanic ash, we look at 12 and 10.8 micron, find that difference. If you want to find fog, we'll look at 11 and 3.9 micron, find that difference. It's great, different tools for different jobs. Of course, there's always caveats and gotchas, but this fog procedure, it only works at night, because when the sun comes up, it gets in the way. So every product has its strengths and limitations, and in meteorology, the challenge is using the right tool for the right job, and these are some of those tools.
And discovery is still happening, even with meteorology. The weather's been around for a long time, but the tools that are being developed to understand the meteorology is fascinating and still very new science.
It's such a young science. We've come so far. I'm getting old enough now that I can literally say that, you know, when I was a boy, we didn't have this kind of thing. And there's new things happening all the time. New satellites will be launched in coming years that will have better instruments than ever before. It's an exciting time, and this is so helpful for Alaska because satellites help fill in the gaps between other ways of observing the weather. Satellites, the great equalizer for Alaska.
Yeah, and help so many people stay safe in so many ways every day up here in the last frontier.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, protecting lives and property.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. We love to hear about this fascinating information, and boy, it just makes me want to go watch satellite pictures all day. So hopefully we're inspiring more people to do the same thing, and just be curious. It's a wonderful thing. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Today's sea ice analysis still showing some new growth going on out here and thickening, especially with the blue area here shrinking by the day. Not much change out here except maybe getting a little heavier, but not really getting too much farther to the south. And looks like even a little bit forming here on the coast of the north coast of Kuskokwim Bay area. And over the next several days, we're not looking for any real big changes. Moving on, coastal water forecast. Tomorrow, southeast, 30 to 35 on the south coast, 40 knots on the north coast with seas around 20 feet. Southerly gales for Lynn Canal, 35 knots out of the south, and southeast at 20 for Stevens Passage, a little lighter, 15 knots down at Clarence Strait. And then on Tuesday, small craft advisories here on the south coast, actually all of the coast here for southeast winds turning east up north. Southeast 15 knots, central and southern inside waters, northern inside areas south at 15. And for Prince William Sound, southeast 25 knots, so lighter winds than today for sure, especially for the North Gulf Coast here, southeast at 20, 14 to 15 foot seas, and northeast at 10 for northern Cook Inlet. South of the Forelands, though, south 15, west 15 Kamishak Bay. And for Tuesday, those winds increase again here, northeast 20, north of the Forelands. Small craft advisories there for southern Cook Inlet into Kamishak Bay. Northeast 30 knot winds here all the way out across the Barrens, turning east at 30, then back to northeast at 30 for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Northeast 20 for Prince William Sound, seas right around 4 feet. And for Kodiak Island, southwest 25 knots, northwest 25 from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, then east 20, Castle Cape to Cape Sarachef. North side of the peninsula, north 15, northwest 20 for Bristol Bay. Those turn northeast at 20 on Tuesday. And for the peninsula here, Bering Sea side, northeast 25 knots, small craft advisories, north winds 25 on the Pacific side. Castle Cape to Sitkinak, north 30 knots, and gales in the forecast for Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, as well as the east side, they're northeast at 35. And for the Fox Islands, east-northeast, 20 to 35 knots, call it 20 to 30 out of the east around Alaska Island, east-northeast up to 35 there, just coming to the western edge of Unmak Island, northeast 20 to 30 for the central Aleutians, and northerlies tapering off as you head out towards Shimmy down to about 20 knots. And for Tuesday, those turn southwest at 25 on Tuesday, and north 20 here from Kiska to Adak, and then north to northeast 25 to 30 for the Adak-Atka area, and northeast 30 to 35 here for the Fox Islands. Again, strongest winds, Unmak Island. And for tonight on the southwest, or for tomorrow on the southwest coast, northerlies 10 to 20 knots, seas 3 to 5 feet, south 20 for St. Matthew Island, southeast 10, light winds tomorrow for the Pribilofs. Light winds, light and variable actually, for St. Lawrence Island into Norton Sound at 10 knots with 2-foot seas or less. And for, let's see, Tuesday, south 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Iced over again here for St. Lawrence Island zone, so no sea heights there, south 20 knots, north at 20, turn northeast 25 here, right out of Kuskokwim Bay, out of the interior, on out to the Pribilof Islands at, again, 25 knots, seas 7 to 8 feet. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, again, looking at where you have that winter storm watch out here for the coastal zones, east coming up to 30 to 35 knots. West 25 on the central coast, brisk wind advisories there, and then southwest 20 there for the west side, 20 knot winds all the way to Cape Thompson, south 15, Cape Thompson to Wales. And for Tuesday, here, Wales all the way up to the west side there, say Point Lay, south 20 knots, lighter southerlies on the central coast, 10 to 15, and lighter winds on the east side as well, 15 to 20 out of the west. And for tonight, this system continuing to get a lot of moisture from almost down around Hawaii coming northward here into the North Gulf Coast, but rain ending and conditions improving as this whole area starts to shift back to the west. Winter storm warning continues for the Galena area, actually the Kobuk Valley, and winter storm watch out for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. That's for tomorrow. Otherwise tonight rain continues, snow along this boundary here west of the Alaska Range, clearing out along the west coast. For tomorrow, sunshine in the west, rain in the east, becoming sunny and warmer over the Panhandle, dry in the Tanana Valley. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.